chatting in the room tonight. I understand from chatting from some people in the room, you've actually, Ken, you've helped some of the boat owners in the room tonight with some of their issues. And so we are, oops, hold on. We are anxious to hear your remarks. And Chris, could you just introduce our speaker for the evening? Maybe I'm
Certainly.
oh, thank you.
Thanks,
There you go.
Russ. So Ken,
I'm going to step away so everybody can see the group here.
all right. So Ken comes to us, actually a recommendation from a club member who is a big fan of the Stingy Sailor website, where the motto of the Stingy Sailor is DIY trailable sailboat restoration improvement without throwing your budget overboard. Don't throw your money away on something that most people consider to be a sinkhole of cash anyways. Figure out what's DIY-able and what you shouldn't do yourself, because it can get you into trouble. So with no further ado, I'd like to put Ken Billing up on stage. Ken, take it away, sir.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. That's a great introduction. It's great to hear that some of your members have been in contact with me. I get emails from literally all over the world almost every day, certainly every week, of people asking questions about this or that or the other thing. But I never know where they come from unless they say. And so it's always interesting to find out where people come from and to know that I've helped somebody get over a problem or get some experience or get some confidence in being able to do something, and that it's meant a lot to them. And probably the thing that is the most rewarding to me is, seeing dads and moms, grandparents passing on their love of sailing to their kids and their grandkids, and getting the younger generations involved and keeping this sport alive and healthy and vibrant. And so that's really rewarding to me. That's the most important thing. And the reason why I started the website so many years ago was to share what information I was able to gain through this process of from a non-sailor and not being raised around, boating and water, to being a pretty self-sufficient sailor, because there were a number of people that helped me out along the way, a number of online resources and in-person encounters. And so I just wanted to document what I had done and make that available to others to kind of pay it forward, is really how it went. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, my background is kind of in engineering. So that's kind of why if you read my website, you see it can tend to be pretty technical, right? So my career since engineering for the last 30 years or so has been in technical writing. So I write for a living, or did. I recently retired in May from technical writing in the software industry. I don't do fiction very well, although if you've been a long time reader of my website, you've found a few articles in there where I took a couple of swings at some fiction, or to lighten things up and add a little imagination to it. But that's really not my strong suit. I'm much stronger in just telling it like it is, just the facts and straight ahead. Oddly enough, it was part of my career that got me started in sailing. The company that I was working for, we had a pretty eccentric president for a few years, and he made this outlandish promise many years back, that if the company met its numbers, its expected revenue and sales and everything, that he would shut down the entire company and send us all to someplace warm and tropical. Well, that was the carrot that a lot of people needed. And so we actually exceeded expectations that year. And he literally did shut down the company. This is a Dutch company, had dozens of employees in Holland, dozens of employees in the US, a software development center in Russia. We had a number of employees in Brazil, and literally flew them all to the Dominican Republic for 4 days. And it was there that I first tried a beach cat on the beach there at the Dominican Republic. I stayed a little after the conference. My wife met me down there for Valentine's Day, and we spent a few extra days and just had a blast down there in the warm waters, sailing around on that catamaran. And we came home thinking, you know, that was a lot of fun. We should really get into this. And so we were looking for a travel trailer at that time. And so we're thinking, well, should we get a travel trailer for camping, or should we get a boat and enjoy boating and sailing? And so, of course, the idea is natural. Why not do both? Because most oftentimes we would be camping near water anyway. We would often camp near lakes. So we purchased Summer Dance, our Catalina 22 that year, and started refitting it. And kind of the rest is history. Practically refitted the entire boat. There's not much that I haven't done to it yet. And every bit of it is documented on the website. There's now over 200 articles on there, and probably 180-ish are projects. And the rest are, there's a handful of product reviews, a handful of book reviews, a handful of just commentaries on there, but mostly it's projects. And so that's been kind of where that all came from. I'm going to try and share my screen with you now, and let's see how this works out. I'm going to share a part of it. All right. This looks doable. Can you see the blue screen now? Anybody?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think this will work as long as it doesn't flip this other thing off when I advance. Okay, let's try this. Okay. All right, so the title of this this evening is To DIY or Not to DIY. And of course that comes from, is a line from William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. And so I went ahead and butchered the rest of the quote here. And so to carry on with that theme, to DIY or not to DIY, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to pay an outrageous fortune to somebody else to work on your sailboat, or to take matters into your own hands against a sea of doubt, and by opposing it, repair or improve your sailboat and learn something new in the process. So that's the goal of our evening here. And so it's great to see all of you present here tonight. Especially enjoy seeing all of the ladies here. You know, one thing that surprised me about the website over the years is how many ladies take the lead in sailing and repairing their sailboat and are just in love with it. And so I really love seeing the ladies get involved, that it's not a totally male sport as sometimes it's made out to be. So really great to see all you ladies active and working on your boats and such. So I wanted to do just get a little bit of a feel for everybody that's in our audience here tonight and ask you, what is your DIY experience? And so here are your options. And let's see, this is gonna be kind of difficult. Maybe we'll just do a raise of hands. So let's start from the top here and raise your hand if you are an avid DIYer. You just take it on, got this, I'm gonna take care of it. I'm gonna do that job. Can see maybe a couple of hands there. All right. I can't see everybody online, but that's okay. By the way, Chris, did you get any requests, email from people outside of the club to join tonight?
Yep, we always have guests.
Okay, because I put a blurb out on my Facebook page and basically invited the world to dial in here tonight and join us. So I was just curious if many people took us up on that. All right, so the second bullet here. So raise your hand if you've done a few simple remove and replace projects, kind of bolt on, bolt off. I can change a winch, I can change a cleat, I can do that sort of thing, but anything more than that, I kind of stay away from it. All right. And then raise your hand if you're new to sailboat DIY, you wonder what that's all about, and you want to get started learning to work on your own boat. All right, great. I see a bunch more hands. Good. Well, I think you're in the right place there tonight. I hope to be able to help you make make wiser decisions about what to work on, what not to work on, and kind of break it down for you to help you make those kind of decisions a little bit. So part of this whole DIY thrust of what I've been involved with sailing, a lot of that arose out of what's called the right to repair. And a lot of people aren't familiar with this, but this was a movement that was started probably 10, 15 years ago, primarily in the electronics industry, but a lot of it arose out of appliance repair. You know how it is. Your $1,000 washing machine stops washing correctly. You call the repairman, he comes in, okay, I'm sorry, ma'am, you need a $700 control board and, you know, $500 worth of labor. And by the time it's all said and done, the costs of repairing it are more than you paid for the item. So the ethos of right to repair, and this comes from repair.org. So if you're interested in following up on this a little bit more, you can go there online and dig into it. And so their ethos is basically, you bought it, you should own it, period. And you should have the right to use it, modify it, repair it whenever, wherever, and however you want to. So this primarily is a movement to try and pressure manufacturers to make available information about their products so that you can repair them, to make parts available at a reasonable price, and to not lock in proprietary designs and proprietary techniques and proprietary tools and proprietary services to where you basically can't repair something that you actually purchased and you thought you owned, but turns out you're just kind of having the right to use it, but they have the right to either maintain and repair it, replace it, you know, supersede it as they wish, and in financially. So that's where kind of a lot of this came to fruition for me, was a couple of things that I had wanted to repair, but it was either unfeasible because you couldn't get, you know, say schematic diagrams or an exploded diagram of how the thing is supposed to fit together, or parts numbers for a part, or it needed a special tool or a special person to be able to repair something. So a lot of what the Stingy Sailor is about is empowering people to work on their own sailboats without feeling like they have to use a professional all of the time. There are where it makes a lot of sense, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But a lot of the time you can do it and you can have fun in the process. So let me ask another question, and go ahead and raise your hand if you've ever hired a tradesperson to work on your sailboat for you for any sort of a job. It could be a sailmaker, somebody to work on your bottom paint, an electrician. Okay, just a few. Good, good. All right. So among the people that I've talked to and met that are avid DIYers, they tend to fall into some personality types versus the people who tend to not work on their sailboats a lot. So I found that a lot of detail-oriented people who have some skills they've probably acquired either in their career, acquired doing home maintenance or home DIY projects, tend to adapt really easily to doing sailboat DIY projects. Another group that is fun to watch and fun to work with are those who are just not afraid to try something. You know, some of us, we have fairly older sailboats. They've been worked on over several owners. You know, there's been mistakes made, there've been replacements done. And, you know, really, how badly can you mess up a sailboat, a fiberglass sailboat specifically? And if you're just not afraid to try, just about anything can be fixed. These things are pretty durable, pretty sturdy. So let's see a show of hands if you would consider yourself to be detail oriented, you've got some skills, and you kind of geek out on this kind of stuff. You enjoy doing DIY projects and working on your sailboat. Not so many. Okay, good. There's a few. And how many of you would say, well, I haven't done a whole lot of this, but I'm really excited to learn about it. I'm not afraid to try something. I can always get help if I need it, but I'm open to learning something new. Great, great. That's good to see. You know, there's probably one type of project that has really stood out to me through everything that I've done that's been interesting to watch, and that is guys learning to sew canvas. You know, that's kind of been the domain of women for a long time, and a lot of guys just don't want to even know how a sewing machine works, can't thread a needle to save their life, could not cut in a straight line, etc. But interestingly enough, a lot of guys, once they sit down with some canvas and they see how some things are put together, and it's like, you know, I could make this out of wood. This is just canvas. It's not that big of a deal. And I was kind of one of those guys before I got started. And then I kind of got bit by the sewing bug, sewing some canvas projects, and I really enjoy it. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do on your boat sewing canvas. And so it was a case of, I was just not afraid to try it, and I tried it and I liked it. So if that's you, I would encourage you to reconsider sewing canvas. You know, you might be surprised at what you can do. All right, let's take another look now at projects. So when I look at DIY projects, I kind of categorize them in one of these 4 categories. So we've got life projects, we've got technical projects, we've got aesthetic projects, and just plain laborious projects. And so we'll take a little bit closer look at each one of these in turn and kind of break them down a little bit more. So let's start with something like life and safety. So life and safety would be those projects that literally could save or cost you your life if done wrong, or injury, or catastrophic failure of a system on your sailboat, or of something in your sailboat could wind up sinking, etc. So one that instantly comes to mind for me is like propane piping. If you have heating devices or cooking devices on your boat that use propane, that would be one area where I would definitely hire a professional who has the tools and the expertise and the certification to be able to pipe your boat for new propane devices and make sure that there are no leaks. Because if you're not aware already, propane sinks, it's heavier than air. And so you could have a leak and not even know it, not even smell it, but have propane accumulating in the bilge of your sailboat. And then all it takes is a spark and up it goes. There's lots of documented cases. If you start looking at boat fires and how they were caused, many times they're caused by propane fires. And so that's an area that unless you've been involved in an industry where you've done that type of work, it's best left to somebody who has done that for a living. And it'd be money well spent for peace of mind, for safety and security on your boat. And that goes the same for all of these project types. Safety is always of utmost concern. You want to make sure that what you're doing is not going to jeopardize the safety of yourself, your family, your guests on your boat, or your boat itself. So that kind of takes care of life and safety. Now, you might be thinking of a couple of other things that might fit in there, and those might fit into this next category. All right. These I'll call technical projects. So these would be projects like electrical wiring projects, like standing rigging projects, where you need to know your stuff to take these on. You can't just take an educated guess or even an uneducated guess when working on these systems. And here I give you a couple of examples of information that you should be familiar with if you're going to take on these projects. So electrical is a good example. Now, a lot of guys and gals, but more often guys, would tell me, oh, I've added a radio into my car or my truck, or I've wired up, a trailer harness to my truck. So I'm used to 12-volt automotive electrical systems. Well, that gives you some good background, but it really doesn't cover the entire scope of electrical wiring on a sailboat or a powerboat for that matter. Just marine electrical systems are considerably different than automotive electrical systems are. And one good place to learn about those is called the ABYC E11 standards. And ABYC stands for American Boat and Yacht Council. This is the standards organization here in the United States that sets standards for how production boats should be built and wired. Okay. And E11 is the electrical standards portion of the overall ABYC standards. Now, unfortunately, the full ABYC standards are not available in the public domain, so you can't go out and look them up online, but there are excerpts of drafts of these standards available online, and I actually provide a link to one in one of my articles here. I'm not going to leave you on the screen because I'm not showing the entire screen, so it's going to look kind of weird for you. And I want to get back to my presentation, wherever that is. All right. So if you want to go to the website, either use the projects menu, look at the electrical projects, or you can search on rewiring your sailboat and look at that article. There's a link in there where I link to an online copy of a portion of the E11 standards. And the important parts in there are the wiring gauges, where you calculate the load in each individual circuit, and that tells you how big of a wire to use, and the color coding standards, which are used by all marine manufacturers and credible repair service people. And that's where you can find out how to wire to those standards. So another example of that is standing rigging. So standing rigging, of course, is the parts of your rigging that don't typically move, which are wire cable that hold up your mast and your forestay, backstay, shrouds, all of that. And so here you need to know the difference between the safe working load of materials and parts in each part of the system versus the max working load or the maximum load of each individual part of the system. So this applies to each individual shroud. Needs to be within a certain percentage of the expected load on your mast, and every clevis and pin and bolt and nut needs to be able to take that same amount of load. So here it takes a little bit of math, it takes a little bit of looking up the specifications for these things. But if you do that, you can successfully build standing rigging for your own sailboat that is very safe and is very much just what a professional would put on your boat. In the case of my sailboat, in case of Summer Dance, I was able to replace some of the rigging myself using these same techniques, and it's worked for years and years. It's not given me a bit of trouble. And it's not that hard to do. There's an article on the website about standing rigging. So if you're interested in that, take a look at it. You can save a lot of money building your own standing rigging. All right, let's talk a bit about aesthetic projects. So an aesthetic project would be one that just has to do with the appearance, the overall appearance and comfort on your sailboat. So think in terms of things like varnish, paint, canvas. And most of these projects are fairly low risk. So there's not much you can do wrong. Now, sometimes the only issue with doing these is just deciding on colors. And, if you're married, that can be a challenge. But between the two of you, you should be able to come up with something that works well. And there are examples of each one of these projects on the site as well. A lot of these just take a certain amount of time, attention to detail, having the right materials, the right tools, and you can do a really good job. And these typically also are the things that are very worn down on our older sailboats, right? All right, let's move on. If you haven't subscribed to the website yet and you would like to, here is what you should look for at the bottom of any page on that website, and that's stingysailor.com. Just enter in your email address, click the subscribe button, and then you'll be notified when new posts come out, new projects a lot of the time, and then you'll be able to see that new content. So at this point, I wanted to open it up and hear from you. Did anybody bring questions to the meeting tonight about any projects or skills or anything else that you'd like us to talk about? Go ahead and bring them forward. Anyone at all? All right. Well, with that, I will turn it back over to you guys. I want to thank you, Pelagic, for inviting me to come to your meeting tonight. I hope that you're all
Okay,
staying
sorry.
healthy.
Sorry, we had a question.
Oh, Ken, sorry, there were questions coming from the floor here. that you
Oh,
couldn't
okay.
hear Because we were muted.
We were on mute.
Go ahead.
So this is Alex Collier. I had a question about winterizing the boat, especially the diesel systems and such like. What your thoughts are about that?
Yeah, winterizing is a huge deal. I just pulled our boat out. I was talking earlier to some of the folks. I pulled it out a week ago. I haven't done all the winterizing on it just yet, but that's what I'm going to do as soon as we get back home. Right now, we're not at home. We're visiting over in Montana and having some fun over here. But before it gets much colder, I want to go through the boat and winterize all the systems on it. I have a winterization checklist on the website that kind of runs down through all the different things that you can do to winterize your sailboat. Covers the motor. I have an outboard motor winterization checklist part of that, but it's also about minimizing the opportunity for mildew and mold to get started in your boat, especially if you live in a place where the humidity is relatively high. Now out here where I live, the humidity is relatively low, so it's not a big problem, but I go through a lot of these steps anyway. So that's things like taking all the electronics out of your boat, take every battery out of everything inside your boat, flashlights, whatever it may be, get those out of there so they don't start corroding. Take everything out of the boat that you can that would be affected by moisture and temperature. Taking everything that's fabric out of the boat, cushions, blankets, you can imagine, take all of that out of the boat. So that's what left that goes through the winter should be relatively impervious to moisture and cold. And then another one of the big things that I do is put a chemical dehumidifier inside the boat. If you don't have a electrical one, if your boat stays in the water, you have electrical service to your boat, you can put an electrical dehumidifier in there, and you know, the boat is close enough, you can go check it, drain it occasionally, you know, whatever it takes to keep that going, to take the humidity out of the air that's trapped inside of your sailboat and try to give it as much ventilation. Woods, things like pouring RV antifreeze down into your plumbing systems to make sure that if there's any water trapped in a low place of tubing or plumbing inside your boat, it doesn't have a chance of freezing and then expanding and breaking that plumbing up. That's most of the really important points of winterization. And so if you go through that every year, then when you start out in the spring, you know, it's always, for me anyway, it's a mad dash. We want to get the boat in, the sun is starting to shine, the weather's warming up. That's not the time that I want to work on my boat for a week or two before I get it launched. I want to get it launched right away and get out on the water. So I try and do all of this stuff at the end of fall going into winter, get the boat ready for the next year, and then it's ready when the weather is. Does that answer your question? Or do we have another question?
I'm going back to your Dominican Republic because I have never sailed down there. Can you comment about where and what you did?
Okay, trying to remember the name of the bay where we were staying. There was a relatively large bay So it was somewhat protected. Trying to remember what the name of the location was. It wasn't too far from the border with Haiti. I know
So
that.
Santo Domingo area on the south side of the island?
I want to say northwest coast. No, not
Oh.
northwest, northeast coast.
Northeast, northeast. Puerto Plata?
That sounds about right.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's kind
I
of a
want to work
stretch
for your
along
company.
there. Well, we haven't been back since, and that company got bought by an American company. So, you know, it's all old news at this point, but it was a very interesting place to visit. Yeah, I mean, there's such a dichotomy there. You land at the airport and you immediately see the poverty in the country and just the conditions and how underdeveloped that part of the island is. And then if you're going to stay in one of the resorts in Dominican Republic, which is right next door to it, you go there and you see all of this opulence and luxury. And to me, that's always been a little disquieting. We've experienced that in Mexico as well, right? If you go down there to Mexico, you can run in across, you know, just abject poverty. And then right next to it, all of this luxury and opulence going on. So it's a little disquieting for me anyway, to see that those extremes in one place that we're just not used to here in the United States, right?
There's a lot of it down there. Yeah, you're right.
But the water was definitely nice and was fun to sail on.
Punta Cana, not Puerto Plata. Does that sound right?
Punta Cana. Punta
Yep.
Cana.
Thank you.
Ken, we have another question from the floor here in Savin Hill.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I have a question about the polyurethane paints. Years ago, the two-part polyurethane paints were a little tricky to use, and the single-part paints have gotten a lot better. I'm just wondering what your experience has been with them and whether there's any reason or advantage to use the two-part paints.
Well, I've used them both. I've used two-part epoxy paints for barrier coat on the bottom after, you know, complete sanding down to fiberglass, down to gel coat, and then used a two-part epoxy paint on that before adding the, you know, ablative or whatever kind of a bottom paint you're going to put on top of that. That forms a really good moisture barrier that helps prevent blistering in the gel coat over time. That was relatively easy to work with. And when I put that on the bottom of my boat about 8 years ago, I haven't noticed any failures at all of that paint. But I wanted the bomb-proof paint on the bottom, right? I don't want to ever have to do that job again or replace it or repair it. I've also used polyurethane one-part paints, primarily on the boot and cove stripes on my boat. And there's an article about that on the website as well. It's held up really well. It goes on really nice. I was really surprised at how smooth and glossy. I'm speaking primarily of, let's see, what is the name of it? Topsides, I believe. Goes on really smooth, really shiny, pretty hard. But with it, since it isn't as much of a strong chemical bond, preparation is a little bit more important, I believe. I have noticed the last couple of years in pulling out my boat, the parts of the polyurethane paint that were underwater, and the paint's meant for topside, so it's not meant to be underwater, but the part of my boot stripe is underwater, typically, has started bubbling and peeling off a little bit. And so I probably should have done a little bit better bottom preparation for that. But other than that, both paints seem to work pretty well as long as you're using them for their intended purposes, of course. So make sure that the paint that you're choosing is, intended for above water or below water, interior versus exterior. If it's going to be an exterior project, make sure that it has UV inhibitors in it. Otherwise, you might find the color fades or the paint breaks down over time from UV exposure. But I haven't had a bad experience with either one of them, I guess I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more.
Got another question coming up, Ken.
Great.
Hi there. Electrical question. Well, it's more of a complaint.
And you're an electrician.
Well, when you do the load calculations for your wire runs, and then you're gonna run either a 14 or a 12 up to the device. And then the device has an 18 or a 20 wire coming out of it. It just doesn't make any, and how do you connect a small wire to a large wire? You can't butt splice them. I've been soldering them. And the problem, one of the particular problem that jarred my memory was the bilge pump on my 13-foot inflatable. Every year, it doesn't even last a year. The bilge pump wire is only about 6 inches long, and it's a submersible pump. So the connections are always in the salt water. And usually by the end of August, the pump's not working. I take it up, no matter how much shrink tube I put on, the connections are just junk. So
Yeah, I'm with you.
council should speak, they should do something about a device with a hair for a wire, and then you're running big heavy wires up to it. That's my problem. Is there any other way of connecting it other than soldering them? That you know of, when there's that much difference in this wire size?
No, none that I've come across. You can't really do a good crimp connection with that big of a difference between wires. There are butt splice connectors that are made for dissimilar sizes on each side of it. So you can have like a 12 on one side and a 16 on the other. There's usually a range. So you could do like a 14, 16 on one side and a 12, 14 on the other. But a big difference like you're talking about, I haven't seen anything like that. So I would do probably a terminal strip or something that would make a really good, solid, secure connection on both ends of the wire. I ran into this recently when I installed the chart plotter on my sailboat, and the wiring that come out of the chart plotter was this cable about 3/8 of an inch around, but it had like 12 wires in it, and they're all 22 gauge wires. And you have to connect that up to, like you say, a 14 or a 16 gauge wire. And you can't get a good solid connection, one that you want to be able to rely on for a long time. So sometimes you have to get pretty creative. As far as underwater connections, I don't know if you use they make a, how would you say it? It's almost like a cap that surrounds the electrical connection, and then you fill it with like wax or epoxy, and it just kind of encases it solidly. I would look for something like that to do an underwater connection, but yeah, it's not ideal for sure.
All
Can I
right.
butt in for a minute?
Sure.
Sure.
What do you think of using the larger solderless crimpable terminal for the larger wire, and then taking the smaller wire and doubling it over 2 or 3 times to fill it up and then crimp down on that?
That's what they tell you not to do.
I've done that in the past, just because I didn't have a better solution at the time. But the problem that I've always found is that little 22 gauge wire or whatever fails right at the point of connection, because you've got relatively a lot more weight in the larger gauge wire and the butt connector. And if there's any vibration at all, those 2 wires are going to work independently of each other. And you know how it is with any wire, you bend it enough times, it breaks. And so it breaks right at that point where it goes from very thin to very thick. So if you do have to do that, then I would make sure that I cover it with, try to taper the stiffness of the larger wire down to the smaller wire using multiple layers of shrink wrap and longer, so that you don't get a working deflection point right at the connection, because that will eventually break and fail on you. But I like the idea of soldering. That's better than crimping for sure, especially when you have those dissimilar sizes.
Right.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Oh, yep. One more question coming up, Ken.
I'd just like to make a comment that solder does not meet ABYC standards. The connection must be crimped or it doesn't meet the standard.
That is true.
Thank
For
you,
the same
Brian.
reason that I mentioned, because it creates a very solid point with a flexible point. That's why they don't like soldered connections.
Anything else? No?
Any other questions? Projects that people are interested or curious about taking on?
I think you've
Or
covered
even-
everybody on this end, Ken.
All right. Or if you have any suggestions for future articles, please let me know. I always take requests.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. It was a pleasure having you join us tonight, and we certainly learned a few things, and we'll be looking for your website.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Stay healthy and
Right.
safe.
Before you leave, Ken,
Yeah,
we're gonna ask you to choose a hat.
You can't go wrong with navy blue.
Navy
All
blue.
right.
You got it.
Bill?
I'll get your
Or a
address and
watch
title,
cap.
send it out.
So a watch cap is like a knit beanie.
It's like
Yeah.
a winter.
Ah, I don't wear watch caps very often. I tend to run hot. So, but I lose hats in the summer. I lost one. In fact, this last summer, I was speeding across somewhere and the wind popped up and it blew it right off the back of my head. So I go through caps, ball caps. So I could use a
So you're gonna
pelagic ball cap.
sprinkle our name across your path, is that it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have another item to purchase from the quartermistress here. Ties. All right. A navy cap it is. Chris, send me the contact and I'll put that in the mail. Thank you so
Will do.
much, Ken.
Thanks for everybody coming out tonight, and God bless and stay safe.
You too.
Thank you.